Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave, on behalf of every father and every mother who waits for freedom, on behalf of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a fantastic show for you today. The boys have been hard at work for you to do a deep dive into Operation Spiderweb. First, if you could, though, please do hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell, do all the stuff YouTube likes you to do if you like a channel, because it really helps us out. We show spicy videos here on the show, and YouTube doesn't like that, so your support really matters because it helps us fight the algorithm, which is a bit biased against our even-handed analysis of such spicy things. Also, you can check us out on social media on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tochnyi, and then you can also go to our website, tochnyi.info. And that, of course, is where we publish all of our official research and really highly detailed things like maps and stuff like that. So we highly recommend you go check out our website. For example, they just published their new article about Operation Spiderweb on the website. So highly recommend you guys go check that out. I believe the link's in the chat there if you want to take a look, or we'll get that in there and put it in the description. So this week we have a great show for you. We have, first, of course, I'll be presenting the news as always. That'll be followed by a discussion with a special guest, a F-16 pilot from the great country of Norway, who has some very deep knowledge of the Russian Air Force, who's going to do a little bit of a discussion about that with us. And we'll do a more of like full presentation on what the boys have been learning about what happened on Operation Spiderweb. So that's the next thing. And then after that, we'll be having a presentation from our colleague Stanimir, who is an expert on all things Russian economy. And the Russians, of course, have had a few updates to what's going on with their policies. So we're going to look into that. So, and then finally, we'll wrap that up with Q&A. So if you guys have any questions in chat, feel free. You can post your questions. We'll do our best to address them at some point during the stream. With that, I will go ahead and present the news. These are the main headlines as of June 8th, 2025. First up, we have operations. Overnight on June 5th to 6th, Ukrainian unmanned aerial systems struck the Bryansk International Airport, located in the village of Oktyabrskoye in Russia's Bryansk Oblast. The attack resulted in the complete loss of a Russian Mi-8 helicopter, with its onboard munitions igniting in the aftermath. The second aircraft, an Mi-35 helicopter, sustained partial damage during the same event. According to the Russian telegram outlet Astra, infrastructure at the airport was also affected, including administrative offices and the nearby emergency response center. No injuries were reported, although personnel from an adjacent logistics facility were evacuated as a precaution due to the scale of the explosions. Footage circulated on social media showed multiple follow-up blasts occurring after the initial drone strike, indicating the likely presence of volatile materials on site. Open-source intelligence analysts referenced by the outlet Militarny observed that aircraft had been frequently repositioned at the airfield in recent months, suggesting that the civilian airport had been integrated into ongoing military activity. The same analysis noted that while the exact nature of the material stored there is uncertain, the intensity of the detonations implies the presence of a significant stockpile, possibly munitions, contributing to the extensive damage. Also on June 5th, Ukrainian Defense Forces targeted an oil storage facility in the city of Engels, located in Russia's Saratov Oblast. The site, struck by Ukrainian drones, plays a critical logistical role in refueling long-range aircraft used in launching missile attacks against Ukraine. The governor acknowledged an unmanned aerial vehicle strike, but did not publicly identify a specific facility involved. Despite the lack of official claims, footage widely shared on social media and Russian Telegram channels depicted extensive flames and dense smoke rising from the area, consistent with the ignition of fuel reserves. The Engels airport has been previously struck by Ukraine, most notably in January of 2024, when it also sustained heavy fire damage that took days to contain. In the early hours of June 6th, a Ukrainian drone strike targeted the Progress plant in Michurinsk, located in Russia's Tambov region. The facility holds strategic importance due to its role in producing sophisticated components used in missile guidance and aviation systems. The incident, reported by Astra and corroborated by regional media, involved what appears to have been a single drone, which struck the facility at approximately 2:15 a.m. local time. The impact triggered a fire within the industrial zone, prompting emergency response units to deploy quickly. Videos posted by the Supernova Plus Telegram channel showed flames visible from the outside perimeter of the plant. In response, local authorities temporarily closed traffic routes leading to the site, and civilians were instructed to avoid the area while emergency operations were underway. The acting head of the Tambov region stated that 3 individuals sustained injuries during the event. He attributed the injuries to debris from the drone, noting that 2 of the injured were taken to medical facilities. The Progress plant also produces civilian electrical systems and parts used in the oil and gas industry. On the morning of June 7th, Ukraine's military announced that its Air Force brought down a Russian Su-35 jet over the Kursk region. The downing occurred during an operation described as successful by Ukrainian officials, although they did not release any specific details about the method or the precise location. Aerial footage published by the Ukrainian Air Force showed burning wreckage, and they claimed it to be the remains of the aircraft. Russia's Ministry of Defense has not issued a statement regarding the reported incident. However, independent Russian sources have provided some confirmation. A local media outlet in the neighboring Belgorod region reported that the crash occurred in the Kornevsky district of Kursk. Also, Fighter Bomber, a Russian Telegram channel aligned with pro-military narratives, claimed that the pilot survived and rescue efforts are underway. The Su-35 is one of Russia's top-tier 4th-generation combat aircraft, equipped with advanced radar and electronic warfare systems. Since the start of the full-scale invasion in 2022, it is believed that at least 7 Su-35s have been lost due to various causes, including Ukrainian attacks, accidents, or misidentification by Russian air defenses. Ukrainian defense firm Aviation New Technologies has introduced a new domestically developed reconnaissance drone named Mercury, purpose-built to operate under frontline conditions. With vertical takeoff and landing capability, the drone has already been deployed in combat scenarios and is now officially recognized by Ukraine's Ministry of Defense. Mercury was designed from the ground up for wartime use, not adapted from civilian technology like many drone systems. The company emphasizes that the system was developed in direct collaboration with the military, with the specific goal of addressing the operational challenges Ukrainian forces face in real combat environments, particularly under Russian electronic warfare pressures. The drone is intended for tactical reconnaissance, surveillance, fire correction, and target acquisition, even under active electronic interference. Its features include dual independent communication systems and adaptive software that allows for manual control, autonomous operation, or waypoint-based navigation. Thanks to its vertical takeoff and landing system, it can be launched from just a 5 by 5 meter space, allowing it to operate from uneven or mined terrain without the need for a runway or launch system. The drone can stay airborne for up to 3 hours, operate at altitudes of 1,200 meters, and reach speeds of 65 to 90 kilometers per hour. Real-time video transmission is stable up to 70 kilometers away, while onboard recording allows for missions up to 100 kilometers in range. Its full range is around 200 kilometers. It includes a high-resolution day camera with 270 times zoom and a thermal imager, enabling effective use across different conditions. From setup to launch, Mercury is mission-ready in under 15 minutes. Each package contains 2 drones, a ground control station, and 2 rugged transport cases. Combat trials were conducted with units from the Unmanned Systems Forces, the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, and Operational Command North. The company stated that the trials validated its performance in high-intensity environments near the front lines. Major Robert Magyar Brovdi has been appointed as the new commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces of Ukraine's armed forces, according to a decree published on the official website of the President of Ukraine. He takes over the role from Colonel Vadim Sukharevsky. The decree was dated on June 3, 2025, and formalizes the leadership transition, but it remains unclear who will succeed Brovdi as the head of the 414th Separate Unmanned Systems Brigade, which he previously led. Brovdi, that guy on our intro, began his military career in February of 2022, joining as a soldier in the Obolon Battalion under the Territorial Defense Forces. Before his formal enlistment, he assisted in the evacuation of civilians from towns such as Irpin, Bucha, and Borodyanka while he was attached to the 206th Territorial Defense Unit. His responsibilities quickly grew, and he later served as a platoon commander in the 206th 2nd Assault Company, which operated under the 28th Separate Mechanized Brigade in the Kherson area. His unit, originally known as Magyar's Birds, started a small formation and gradually expanded over the course of 2024. It evolved from a tactical element within the territorial defense structure to a component of the land forces under the 59th Separate Motorized Infantry Brigade, and later became the 414th Separate Battalion of Unmanned Systems under the Marine Corps. Eventually, it was reorganized into its own full brigade. Under Brovdi's leadership, the unit participated in some of the most intense battles of the war, including operations in Kherson, Krynki, Soledar, Bakhmut, Avdiivka, Marinka, and Uruzhanye. By early 2024, he reported that the group had been engaged in combat operations for nearly 700 days. Over that period, 16 of its personnel have been honored with the Order of Courage in recognition of their actions. On May 8th, President Zelensky awarded Brovdi the title of Hero of Ukraine, the country's highest national honor, in acknowledgement of his leadership and the operational effectiveness of the unit that he built from the ground up. We here at Tochnyi have a great respect for Magyar's Birds and Brovdi, and we wish him the best of luck as the new commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces of Ukraine. Up next, we have economy and aid. At the 28th Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting in Brussels, Canada's Defense Minister David J. McGuinty announced a new military support package for Ukraine valued at around 35 million Canadian dollars or 25 million USD. According to Canada's National Defence Service, the package includes 30 million Canadian dollars allocated towards armored vehicles and related equipment, and the remainder of the funding goes to electronic warfare systems. The armored vehicle portion focuses on the Coyote and Bison models, expanding on Canada's earlier delivery of 64 Coyotes shipped to Ukraine in December of 2024. These vehicles are equipped for surveillance, reconnaissance, and battlefield intelligence operations, key functions for tracking enemy movements and maintaining situational awareness under frontline conditions. The new funding will also support the provision of additional equipment and munitions sourced from Canadian defense companies. An additional 5 million Canadian dollars is directed towards the procurement of electronic warfare anti-jammer kits developed by Canada's defense industry. These systems are designed to preserve the functionality of Ukraine's precision weapons and communications in environments targeted by Russian electronic interference, helping to ensure that drones, guided munitions, and battlefield networks remain operational. Since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Canada has pledged around 19.5 billion Canadian dollars in total aid to Ukraine, with 4.5 billion of that dedicated to military assistance. On June 4, 2025, the Dutch Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans announced a new maritime security aid package for Ukraine valued at 400 million euros. The support, also revealed at the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting, includes over 100 naval vessels of various types and more than 50 maritime drones, marking a major expansion of Ukraine's maritime defense capabilities. The package covers a wide range of vessels, such as patrol boats, transport craft, interceptors, and special operations boats. In addition to the hardware, the Netherlands is providing weapon systems, sensors, spare parts, and specialized training for Ukrainian personnel. Forming what Brekelmans describes as a fully integrated support program, the Dutch government framed assistance as critical to countering growing Russian naval activity. The Netherlands linked the initiative to a broader strategy aimed at protecting Ukraine's maritime sovereignty and ensuring the continued operation of commercial sea lanes. The UK government has announced a significant expansion of its drone support for Ukraine, committing $474 million in 2025 to ramp up drone production and deliveries. This investment will increase the number of drones sent to Ukraine from 10,000 in 2024 to a projected 100,000 units by the end of the year. The funding is part of a broader $6 billion UK military aid package for Ukraine this year. The decision was confirmed by Defense Secretary John Healey during the Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting, where he appeared alongside his German counterpart and Ukraine's defense minister. According to the UK Ministry of Defense, the sharp increase in drone deployment reflects Ukraine's successful use of these systems to disrupt Russian operations and maintain defensive positions along the front. British-made drones being supplied to Ukraine include a range of types: first-person view drones for targeted strikes, interceptor drones for countering aerial threats, and fiber-optic controlled systems that are resistant to electronic warfare. A substantial portion of battlefield damage to Russian equipment, estimated at 60 to 70%, is now attributed to drones, particularly low-cost explosive-dropping models and FPVs. In addition to the drone program, it was announced that Britain had delivered 140,000 artillery rounds to Ukraine since January of 2025 and is allocating another $334 million this year for training programs under Operation Interflex, which has provided over 55,000 Ukrainian troops training since it began in 2022. French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu announced a new industrial collaboration between a major French car manufacturer and a French defense sector SME to begin drone production in Ukraine. Although the companies involved have not yet been named, Lecornu described the initiative as a partnership that aligns France's industrial capacity and Ukraine's frontline combat experience. The announcement followed bilateral discussions between Lecornu and Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov at the NATO headquarters during the Defense Contact Group meeting. He emphasized that the project reflects France's recognition of Ukraine's operational edge in drone warfare and its ability to develop effective combat drones through real-world battlefield application. In response, Umerov welcomed the move, calling it a mutually beneficial and strategic partnership. He noted that Ukraine is open to cooperation with leading global manufacturers and stressed the value of pairing France's industrial base with Ukraine's wartime technological advancements. In a case of reverse aid, the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump has decided to divert a critical component originally intended for Ukraine's air defense, specialized fuses used in rockets designed to intercept drones, to American forces deployed in the Middle East. According to a report by the Wall Street Journal, the Pentagon informed Congress last week that these components, which are essential to Ukraine's ability to counter aerial threats, will now be reassigned to U.S. Air Force units. The fuses are part of a high-precision missile system that had previously been approved for delivery to Ukraine under the Biden administration. Ukrainian forces have used them effectively in ground-based missile systems to intercept Russian drones, a capability the Pentagon had previously praised. The U.S. Air Force, however, has now integrated the same system into fighter jets such as the F-16 and F-15E, where it serves as a cost-effective alternative to traditional air-to-air missiles like the Sidewinder or AMRAAM. An internal directive issued by the Defense Secretary last month authorized the redirection of the equipment, labeling the Air Force's need for technology as a high-priority issue. A memo sent to the Senate Armed Services Committee reportedly classified the requirement as a matter of urgent concern. The Defense Department has not provided any public comment on the decision. While one congressional aide acknowledged that the Pentagon informed lawmakers quickly, another criticized the move, suggesting that it deprived Ukraine of necessary systems at a critical stage. Since taking office, the Trump administration has not approved any new military aid for Ukraine. However, deliveries from previously authorized packages continue. The decision to redirect this particular technology, although not large in value, is reflective of a possible new U.S. policy to realign priorities. France and Belgium have expressed reservations about the European Commission's latest plan to phase out Russian liquefied natural gas, citing the need for stronger legal and economic guarantees before they can support the proposal. I'm shocked, I tell you. The two countries are currently the EU's largest importers of Russian LNG and are calling for more concrete assurances regarding supply, security, and contract protections. The Commission's proposal, introduced on May 6th, aims to end the European Union's dependence on Russian fossil fuels, including gas, oil, and nuclear energy by 2027, while the EU has significantly reduced its Russian gas intake from 45% in 2021 to 19% as of early 2025. Several major member states remain hesitant to sever ties entirely with Russian LNG suppliers. French Energy Minister Marc Ferracci stated that France supports diversifying energy sources, but prefers to ensure replacement contracts are in place before committing to a full phase-out. France has begun sourcing LNG from Qatar and other countries, yet remains tied to long-term agreements with Russian energy companies. One of these is a major contract between France's Total Energies and Novatek, Russia's largest LNG producer, which runs through 2032. Total Energies also owns a 20% stake in the Yamal LNG project in Siberia. Belgium, the EU's second largest customer for Russian LNG, is also not prepared to endorse the plan at this stage. The Belgian energy minister stressed the need for a detailed impact study to assess how cutting off Russian LNG would affect the national infrastructure, including ports and storage sites currently set to handle Russian deliveries until at least 2035. You've only had 3 years to assess that. The position of France and Belgium contrasts with countries like Spain and the Netherlands, which, although they do import LNG from Russia, have signaled readiness to support the Commission's strategy and aren't having a big baby tantrum about it. The divergence highlights ongoing internal divisions that could delay the implementation of energy policy across the European bloc. Ukraine and the United States are moving forward with efforts to operationalize the Joint Reconstruction Investment Fund tied to the fund later this year, with its inaugural board meeting expected to take place in July. During her trip, she held meetings with the U.S. Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent and representatives from the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, which will serve as a key partner in the fund's implementation. Discussions focused on specific steps to activate the fund in 2025, including determining the initial capital required to begin operations. Sverdenko stated that the July meeting will address the adoption of a multi-year investment strategy for the fund. The initiative follows the May 8th vote by Ukraine's parliament to ratify the bilateral agreement with the United States establishing the joint fund. The vote passed unanimously, with 338 MPs voting in favor and no abstentions. If you know anything about Ukrainian politics, you know just how crazy that is. On May 13th, Ukraine signaled 2 commercial agreements with the DFC to support the implementation of the deal. The fund is expected to play a central role in the post-war reconstruction and economic revitalization, particularly in sectors tied to critical minerals and strategic infrastructure. Both governments view it as a mechanism to attract international capital, support recovery, and reinforce long-term economic cooperation between Ukraine and the United States. In the aftermath following the success of Ukraine's Operation Spiderweb, Russian internal security measures have surged, particularly due to the belief that drones may be transported and launched from within civilian trucks. This has triggered a nationwide crackdown, with Russian authorities setting up mass vehicle inspections, leading to traffic congestion across key logistics corridors. Footage from inside Russia shows long lines of halted trucks at checkpoints as suspicion and fear of other drone infiltrations begin to dominate official response efforts. These disruptions are already straining Russia's domestic transport infrastructure, which is heavily dependent on road networks for both civilian logistics and military supply chains. The sudden slowdown threatens to delay military deployments and could undermine Russia's planned summer operations in Ukraine. At the same time, public unrest and paranoia are growing. Several arrests have been made in connection to alleged support roles in the drone strikes. In one reported case, a couple was detained for allegedly providing space for drone staging, while another individual, a truck driver, claimed to have unknowingly transported the equipment linked to the operation. Tensions have escalated to the point of violent civilian responses. In one incident, a truck driver was attacked and lost his life to a mob amid accusations of aiding Ukrainian operations. Ukrainian forces have maintained operational momentum by exploiting the confusion. The rapid follow-up strikes on other airfields have demonstrated Ukraine's ability to adapt quickly and use disinformation, timing, and psychological pressure to weaken Russia's strategic depth. And finally, we have international relations. The European Commission has proposed extending temporary protection until March of 2027 for more than 4 million Ukrainians currently living in the EU. The measure, which still requires approval from member states, would continue to apply to those who fled Ukraine following Russia's full-scale invasion. Approximately 1/3 of these displaced individuals are children. Along with the extension, the Commission is urging EU governments to begin preparing for long-term solutions. These solutions include facilitating access to work and study visas for Ukrainians who wish to remain in the EU beyond the expiration of temporary protection. It also recommends the development of voluntary return programs, including support for Ukrainians considering exploratory visits to their home country. EU Commissioner for Internal Affairs Magnus Brunner emphasized that any return would be entirely voluntary and that discussions about ending the protection framework would only occur in coordination with Ukraine and when conditions are deemed stable. Ukraine has actively developed infrastructure to support its citizens abroad and those considering return. Deputy Prime Minister Oleksiy Chernyshov announced the creation of Unity Hubs, informal community centers to assist Ukrainians with reintegration and local engagement. The first hub is set to open in Berlin this summer, followed by centers in Prague and Alicante. Chernyshov stressed the need for Ukrainians to return after the war, citing the country's need for labor to drive economic recovery and growth. He outlined a vision in which Ukraine could potentially double its economy within a decade, a goal that would require an additional 4 million people to enter the workforce. He linked this growth directly to successful EU integration and long-term national stability. To support Europeans currently residing in the EU, the European Commission announced 4 billion euros in additional funding, bringing the total aid to 19 billion since 2022. Deputy Prime Minister Chernyshov said that ongoing planning with UN agencies like the IOM and the UNHCR is addressing practical concerns for returning families, like housing, employment, education, and healthcare. A Ukrainian delegation met with U.S. senators in a closed-door briefing as the Senate considers a major bipartisan sanctions package targeting Russia and its key energy trade partners, China and India. The meeting, organized by Senators Richard Blumenthal and Lindsey Graham, includes participation from all 100 senators and reflects growing momentum behind the legislation. Ukrainian representatives include Andriy Yermak, the chief of staff to President Zelensky, and Deputy Defense Minister Serhiy Boyev. Their visit comes as support builds for the sanctions bill in the U.S., which now has 82 co-sponsors split evenly across party lines. If you know anything about American politics, you know how crazy that is. The proposed legislation aims to increase economic pressure on Russia by penalizing countries that continue to purchase its oil and gas, maybe France, revenue streams that remain critical to sustaining Moscow's military campaign in Ukraine. Blumenthal emphasized the bill's potential to reshape the war's trajectory, calling it a possible turning point. He also referenced Ukraine's recent deep strikes inside Russian territory as evidence of Ukraine's strategic capability and determination. He cited the drone operations, which targeted air bases far from the front lines, as a direct counter to claims that Ukraine is currently faltering. He likened the sophistication of the operation to other high-profile missions, such as the U.S. raid that killed Osama bin Laden and Israel's capture of Adolf Eichmann. Honestly, I think it was quite a bit more sophisticated than either of those, but I guess Ukraine can just take the compliment. Despite growing congressional backing, the White House has not formally endorsed the bill. However, Blumenthal suggested that Ukraine's demonstrated battlefield innovation, combined with increasing bipartisan support, could eventually persuade President Donald Trump and reluctant lawmakers to support the measure. He indicated that congressional action could proceed regardless of the administration's stance, and expressed confidence that developments on the ground would continue to influence Washington's posture. It should also be mentioned there was a report this week from an American publication, I forget which, but that claimed that the Trump administration, and possibly Trump personally, was leaning on Senator Lindsey Graham, who has been a big proponent of this bill, to sort of water it down. However, Trump himself has denied that that's the case, and he's basically said, like, it's ultimately up to him, and he might do it, he might not, something to that effect. And last item this week. Ukraine has rejected accusations from Russian officials that it delayed a planned exchange of prisoners of war and the repatriation of fallen soldiers' bodies, originally expected to take place on June 7th to 8th. The exchange was agreed upon during the second round of direct peace talks in Istanbul on June 2nd and was intended to involve seriously wounded prisoners and young detainees aged 18 to 25. Russia also pledged the return of the remains of 6,000 Ukrainian service members. President Zelensky indicated that body repatriation would follow a POW swap. On June 7th, the Russian delegation leader Vladimir Medinsky claimed that a Russian Defense Ministry team was already positioned at the border and awaiting Ukraine's participation, but alleged that Ukraine had unexpectedly postponed both operations indefinitely. Ukraine's defense ministry swiftly dismissed the allegation as untrue, framing it as an effort by Russia to avoid honoring its own commitments. Ukrainian officials suggested that Russia was attempting to prevent POWs from being returned to Ukraine while transferring its own captives back to Russia. The ministry emphasized that such behavior undermines trust in Russia's negotiating team and their credibility in adhering to agreements. Ukraine's coordination headquarters for the treatment of POWs also denied any postponement, accusing Russia of distorting facts for political messaging and failing to follow the agreed process. According to Ukrainian officials, they submitted POW lists based on predefined criteria reached in Istanbul, but Russia responded with lists that did not align with those terms. While both sides had agreed in principle on the repatriation of the dead, Ukraine noted that a specific date had not been finalized. The Ukrainian side further criticized Russia for taking unilateral steps outside of the jointly established process, complicating the situation and obstructing meaningful progress. In my understanding, they're referring to a local incident where I think like a Russian unit sort of demanded a 3-day ceasefire to recover bodies from the battlefield, and I think that's what Ukraine's referring to. Ukrainian representatives reaffirmed their commitment to carrying out both exchanges in accordance with the agreed terms and reiterated their readiness to continue working through the established framework. They described Russia's statement and actions as deliberate attempts to manipulate humanitarian issues for informational and political advantage. And that's it for the main headlines this week. Well, Mr. Erlend, I think that's you this week. So I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Joseph. I am very excited to welcome my friend Morten, who is has a very interesting background when it comes to aviation. So, welcome, Morten.
Thanks, Erlend, and the rest of you. I am honored to be here among you. I will supply my comments in my field of expertise, which is from being 11 years in the Royal Norwegian Air Force, flying fighters all the time. In 331 Squadron mainly, which is probably the northernmost squadron in NATO, north of the Arctic Circle, and having almost daily interceptions of Russian aircraft during a year.
Yeah, so I wondered, maybe you could tell a little bit about what your specific role when you were an F-16 pilot, or actually I know you flew some other aircraft as well, in relation to the Russian Soviet Strategic Air Force, since in relation to the aftermath of the Operation Spiderweb, which we're going to talk more about later, I think it's very relevant.
Well, yes, we got daily visitors from the Strategic Air Force when I was a pilot, and continued on through the 90s and 2000s. And that mainly consisted of Tu-95 beers in various variants with various munitions. I cannot say that I ever saw an atomic missile underneath some of those, but they certainly could carry them. Normally they had missiles hanging under. If you take next picture, which is a backfire, this is a typical KH-22 that they normally flew with, but when we intercepted them. Not very precise, as one might say, but designed to be anti-carrier missile. But this is a backfire, and we also had a number of Coot Alphas and other spy aircraft, but also smaller bombers. We once intercepted 24 of them, flying in a very tight formation. So they're on the radar, seemed like one target until they came really close and they simulated an attack on one of our northerly Air Force bases. So we had a big discussion after that, launching 2 hot scrambled F-16s, discovering that you had 24 bombers in front of you that didn't take notice of what we were doing in our presence. They just continued with their mission and simulating 24 aircraft bombing exercise on one of our bases. That's not probably the most normal routine, but we also had a number of interceptions when they were carrying out their own exercises up north. So you might say that we had a very good view of everything that went on with the northern fleet of the Strategic Air Force of Soviet Union at that time, Russian afterwards. And our mission was mainly, since this was a peaceful time, to take photographs like what you see on screen. And remember, half of the year it's pitch dark. So you had to be really close to do the pictures. And if you might see it, the identification number of the aircraft, which was really important for intelligence, is the number underneath the aircraft nose wheel. So basically you had to move in and take note or photograph all the antennas and everything, including the missile, of course. So this is a backfire. You see it's an automatic gun in the rear. In the Bear, you have a guy sitting there in the rear, seeing the sea coming up from underneath his feet, and they were waving to us, signaling that they came in peace, but we never treated it as a peaceful gesture. But these aircraft normally flew down to England and tested the NATO alert all the time, every day, and turned around and came back around northern Norway and back into the Murmansk bases. Could be Olenia, could be other bases, Monchegorsk and so on. So these aircraft seemed very dependable and very capable of operating on continued operation, like year in and a year out. Very seldom there was a big pause in the flying of these strategic airplanes.
Well,
I have never seen the Tu-160, but as I understand, they only built quite a few of those.
so Morten, you say that at that time they had a pretty significant capacity when it came to flying continuously. It has, of course, degraded over time. Do you have any overview over what happened after the fall of the Soviet Union with this air fleet?
Yes, there was a pause of I don't know how many years where they couldn't afford flying like they used to, but that picked up really fast after Putin came back or came into power, as I understand from my colleagues. So I haven't spoken to them after the war broke out in Ukraine in 22. So I don't know if their missions up north has gone down. They probably have. I can also say that in my time, and it's such a long time ago, so I guess it's not a secret, we had, of course, daily tally on our own aircraft, and we had to be able to produce around 50 to 60% status on our own aircraft. If we went below that, that could be acceptable if there was squadrons in not too long distance from us. But normally we would pause flying until our status went back up to around those numbers. If you assume that the Russians are doing it the same way, they try to maintain at least 50% operational aircraft, then you know how many aircraft they have been taken out, or how big a percentage that have been taken out. Regarding the possibility, and we come back to this, I guess, Erlend, of utilizing aircraft as spare parts. This is, of course, going on all the time. Just be aware that many of the components actually are maintained for flying hours, but also taking away hours when they are in the shelf or are standing on the ground in an aircraft. So it's not a one-to-one, but they're not immediately usable if the aircraft has been on the ground for a longer period of time. What we saw when we were flying up there, and we were looking at the numbers and the identification numbers of the aircraft. It was always different aircraft ideas, not always, but most of the time. So it indicated to us that they had a number of aircraft to choose from. And we had no idea actually how many aircraft they could have in the Northern Fleet. But they had at least 3 or 4 bases that they could launch aircraft from. So, and that it was not a very big difference from winter to summer, which means that the aircraft could tolerate the harsh conditions up in northern Russia, which could be really, really cold, much like Canada, I guess.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you or confirm, is it true you took those pictures yourself, the ones that you see on screen?
Yeah, I took those pictures, but it's so long ago, so I guess they're not, this is not a secret anymore. But normally they would not be allowed to be published like this. But this is history and not living pictures.
Yeah, I can see the Tu-21 even has 22 even has the tail gun, which is long since derelict. Yeah, so I guess I want to also introduce Daniele to Morten, because me and Daniele, Brian and other people in the Tochnyi team has been working on both a battle damage assessment, but also an assessment over the whole operation of the so-called Spiderweb operation by the SBU. Me and Morten have been talking since day one of the operation about what kind of effects this has, and of course how impressive this operation is. So welcome, Daniele.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Morten, for being with us. It was beautiful to hear these stories from someone that serves for so long time. I have been told that you have been also a starfighter pilot. I don't know if you want to tell us a little bit about that as well, but thank you for being with us.
Well, I've been a fighter pilot for 11 years, and I also going from starfighter to F-16, and actually, I think I was the first. We were two aircraft there, and I was the lead of the first F-16 that intercepted the Russian strategic airplanes, and I can tell you that they were hanging around in all the windows, taking pictures of us more than we took pictures of them. So for what it's worth, I'm mostly I'm not known for very much, but I'm known for being the first one that ejected from an F-16 after a collision with a rather large bird.
Yeah, I've of course heard this story from Morten. Do you want to say anything more about what happened there?
It's nothing much actually. It's I collided with a crane. The speed was 450 knots, and the crane was at least 6 kilos. And the canopy in the F-16 is what you probably have seen many times. It's a bubble canopy. It actually is a laminated canopy with a gold in between the layers, so you could you can turn on the heat because it accumulates a lot of heat if you are flying in the wintertime and also under certain conditions. So it's actually proven to could take a hit from a medium-sized bird, 3.5 kilos in 350 knots. So hitting one of those rare big birds in much faster speed. Of course, the canopy couldn't take it. It came right through and collided then with a head-up display and then continued right into my visor. Luckily enough, it was a beautiful day, so I had both the clear visor and also the sun visor down, so which probably saved me because I had a lot of glass fractures all around in my face, and it was going from a beautiful day to sitting in a washing machine, something like that. I thought actually I had gotten high current through my body from the radar. That was because I never saw the bird. But I ejected and had a rough ride down to the ground, but was picked up by the helicopter after an hour. And the aircraft kind of glided down towards inland sea and crashed at the shore and was picked up within a week with a lot of effort. So yeah, it's the first time that there was an ejection, a real ejection from the F-16, and it's a two-stage rocket motor, and not dynamite that you are sitting on. So it's a long, powerful ejection sequence, which is designed to be pretty mild on your back and neck, but still I have had quite a few problems with my neck. So it's even if it's supposed to be mild in the ejection sequence, it's definitely tougher than you can get on a normal life, except for crashing your car, probably.
Yeah, I mean, sounds like an absolutely a horrific experience, but very happy that it all went well and the people that designed those ejection seats made a very good job, I guess. I know Daniele already has a question for you, so go ahead, Daniele.
Yeah, thank you, Erlend. My first question is in line with the other topic of the live, which is, of course, the Spiderweb attack on the Russian air bases. And my very first question would be, based on your experience, what was your first reaction and first thoughts when you heard about this attack in the first few hours? What was your first impression? Thank you.
My first impression was how clever the Ukrainians was to attack at the right moment when they have dispersed the Russian aircraft. So I studied up on that a bit, and I saw that they had hammered Engels and a few other bases for, I would say, 6 months. And I would say that is probably one of the most genius moves that they did, that they actually forced Russia to relocate their strategic air force to other bases where they didn't have hardened hangars. So they could be in a position on a certain time that they could hit them where they were standing out in the open. And I was also kind of surprised that they didn't try to cover up the aircraft more than they did. So those are two of my initial reflections. And it's also, from my time, we were always told that it's 10 times easier to take the aircraft on ground than in the air. And you see that now. You should work hard and long to get these results and from an air-to-air shoot-down.
Yeah, of course, you can see the images from the SPU video on screen. I wanted to ask you also a little bit about the aircraft that were hit. So we can start with the Tu-95 Bear. What is the role of the Tu-95 Bear, both on a strategic context and also operationally? Of course, Russia is using them a lot during this war.
Strategically, again, they are probably some of the most versatile aircraft that they have. I would say it's their counterpart to B-52. And they had at least quite a lot of them. So they have built up a pretty good spare situation as well, I guess. They were rugged, and they could take a number of bombs and missiles, and I would say probably it's the most flexible weapon Russia have, in my mind, when it comes to tactical nukes. If one can say that these will be used at any time. Regarding the TU, the backfire ones, I'm not sure.
Tu-22 M3.
Yeah. You know more than me about the precision of those missiles, but if the precision is so low, it could be a valid reason for the Ukrainians to take them up, because they do so much civilian damage just by missing. But the KH-101, I presume it's one of the worst missiles that you could encounter in a normal situation. And since this is becoming a dragged-out war, I guess also Russia must start to look at the price for each attack, and then it's much cheaper to launch a missile from an aircraft than to do a ground-based one. So yeah.
I want to also note that in the Tu-22 picture that you shared with us, that you had taken, there was a KH-22, if I'm not mistaken, which has been used in this war against also civilian targets, most notably a big shopping mall that was hit in, I think, already 2022. That was, I think, an anti-ship missile, if I'm not mistaken.
Initially, it was built as a missile to take out American carriers, and I think it primarily was navigating with inertial navigation systems, but also had an active radar on board. But there are lots of people knowing more about that than me. But I would guess that the KH-32, which is its successor, has a much better targeting system. But again, if they have a good quantity of KH-22, why not use them? It's like that, and God knows what they were aiming for when they hit the shopping mall. So if you cannot hit a target within 500 meters, yeah, you shouldn't be using them, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess that speaks to the complete disregard for civilian life when Russia fires missiles that have absolute no guarantee of hitting within 500 meters. That is not how modern warfare should be conducted if you want to respect any internationally agreed upon rules of war, even though this war is completely, of course, illegal in the first place. Daniele, I think you have more things to follow up with. Yeah.
Yeah, just regarding the KH-22, and if my memory don't, so if I remember well, this was an attack on Odessa. So this was done in Odessa, and I also remember that this was one of the oldest iteration of the KH-22. So I remember at the time there was a lot of discussion about the sense of using an anti-ship missile that probably had a very old sensor that normally is used to navigate overseas. And so, and Morten, if you spot something wrong, please correct me. I'm very happy to learn more. But from what I remember and understood about the KH-22, that the system worked much better on water because the contrast in the image that the missile was able to recognize was essentially easier. So when you go on land, you lose a lot of accuracy. So this is also one of the reasons why it has such big SEEP, because essentially it's not supposed to hit also small target, but carrier. So this was a complete act of terror if you're using, even if you want to hit a military target beyond the civilian location, is irresponsible.
The attack that I mentioned was on Kremenchuk, and it's central Ukraine. But yes, I think it also hit Odessa, not one time, but several times.
Yeah, launched by Black Sea, I guess, from what I remember.
But the normal way of the Russian way of doing it, it used to be that if you couldn't have precision, you just make him bigger. And what you see here on screen is typical that you go for precision with a very small bomb. And this KH-22 is on the opposite end of the scale. So yes, it's very easy to see a carrier group, in particular the carrier, out at sea. And if it was an inertial navigation system in combination with the radar, which is optimized for sea targets, it's probably that it couldn't locate any kind of building down in the middle of Ukraine. So then it would be basically navigating by inertial navigation, which in itself is very imprecise. And it's more and more, or less and less precise as time. It's a linear function of the time.
Yeah, so from the launch of the missile, basically the accuracy is going down while the missile is traveling. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the KH-22 should be not suitable for working in towards land targets in Ukraine, I would say. But they probably have a lot of them, and they probably are one of the cheapest ones to use.
Now, regarding missile and in particular the Tu-95. So one of the things that I was more focused during this analysis was trying to understand more information from the video, because as you can imagine, when we all look at these videos, it's very easy to focus more on the act of destroying the aircraft, but less in understanding what is around the aircraft, what other information we can gather from the video. So I was trying to look at different things, and one of the things that I noticed is that this image comes from a part of the video that was in Olenia. Correct me, Erlend, if I'm wrong, but this should be
that's
Olenia.
correct. Yes.
And this is one of the first few Tu-95 that was hit. They were parked all essentially in a kind of a row, all pointing the runaway. And first of all, you can see that we highlighted in yellow some item that you normally see when an aircraft is serviced. So you can see a lot of ladder, boxes of tools, and many other items that let's think, essentially move us to think that this was an operational aircraft. And after this same aircraft essentially has been seen, and this is a characteristic of all the Tu-95 hit at Olenia, have a particularity, which is the ladder that goes inside the cockpit. So this was open, and this is the ladder that essentially is the only way in the cockpit of the airplane. All them were open and so accessible. And furthermore, under one of these was very easy to spot a KH-101. So this means that these aircraft and many others in this runaway were operable and potentially preparing for a mission. In fact, some of these have been hit also close to the hard points, and we have seen a very large explosion. So this may be also triggered by both the fuel, but also the presence of ordnance on it. What is your take from this analysis? You think is correct? Do you want to add anything? Thank you for your contribution.
I would say that you would never put a missile like this onto an airframe just for to fly around with it. You only put it on as ordered from the operational staff for a particular mission. So when these missiles are hanging underneath the wing, its next mission will be to use it. They never go about the work of loading it on the aircraft, because then they could they would need to evaluate if they should take it off, or the aircraft is not as flexible in use as if this is not the only weapon that they use on this aircraft, of course.
Yeah.
So since the weapons are on, it's ready to go.
And this means that, of course, Ukraine has also potentially preemptively done a strike against a mission that was aimed at them. So wouldn't that also be a strong argument for this being a even more justified action in self-defense?
If you're asking me, I would guess you're right about that. But thinking also about that this aircraft is probably dispersed, so it's moved to another base from its main base. So that means that the planning is at least 2 or 3 missions ahead, because this other base, which is now located, might not have these missiles stored in their ammo bunkers.
Very good point. Should we go ahead, Daniele? I guess next frames.
Yeah, just a little bit of anticipation also to the audience. I want to give you let you know this. Focus your attention of the number of tires on the aircraft by now. So we know that these Tu-95 were operational, and there are just a bunch of tires on them. So just keep this in focus as we progress into the live, because we will show you more things. Okay, Erlend, sorry, I just wanted to drop this spoiler.
No, it's a very good comment. So yeah, of course, this is a Tu-22M3, one of the ones that were attacked during the Operation Spider's Web. As again, we can see the same, not too many tires. It's kind of casually spread on the airframe. And also, you highlight another thing in this slide, Daniele.
Yeah, there are missile. Those are missile, at least container. We don't know if there is anything inside, but they are container. And these are embankment. So essentially on three sides there are embankment, and there is probably a small house where technician can do some work. And you can see that red box is in reality a very large crate just under the aircraft belly, and there is a wing, and there are also larger ladder which allows a technician to reach different part of the airplane. And also another point, in the previous images of the Tu-95, you can see this type of ladder close to the hard point and also close to the only missile that we have been able to spot. So that the strike was done at lunchtime. That's also another thing. There are not many people. We haven't seen anyone around this airplane. So potentially also the decision of attacking at lunchtime wasn't just a guess of the timing. Here, this particular Tu-22M3 enters in a particular category of those that we consider operational. You can spot this because they are serviced, there are equipment around them, and also they are in very good condition. You can see the paint is spotless. They are in very good condition. Instead, when you analyze other target that has been destroyed, look, these are Tu-22M3, but this time they are in much worse condition. They are not in embankment. They are not surrounded by any type of instrumentation. They are flooded with tires and even gray. I think this is a metal panel. And they are also covered in moss and essentially green stuff that normally grows on structure when they are exposed without cleaning and any type of maintenance for a long time. And last but not least, in the last image on the right, you can see the leading edge of the wing where there are some areas where normally you put lights. Another sensor is completely open and broken. So our idea is that these type of aircraft were not in operation, at least not ready for operation, and potentially just there for spare parts. And one thing that many people can argue, why covering everything with tires? So we know that this was a procedure that has been passed since the first strike on Russian airfield, is to cover this airplane with tires. And you would argue, but why the operational one are not covering tire? And this is my assumption, but we reflected a lot together, and we arrived to the conclusion that it's possible. So it's likely that people working, engineer working on the aircraft, the personnel working on aircraft are a human being, and they are lazy. And because they know that it's essentially useless to use the tires on aircraft that they are currently going to use, and so they need to be quickly moved and operated, they just put the bare minimum to don't get in trouble with their superior. And this is a very good spot, I think, because if you look at the different videos that we have seen so far, you will see that the best aircraft have the less tires and the less protection. I don't know, Morten, if you would like to comment on this and add any insight.
And I have no idea if these tires work at all. But this is a function of dispersing the aircraft to a place where they haven't hardened hangars. They even don't have some kind of shelter, light shelter, which has probably protected them better. It is speculation, at least, if these are operational or not. I don't know, but it seems plausible. Regarding the weapons on the picture before this, if this Tu-22 was at its main base, I would think it was very strange that they're storing the missiles like that. But if it was on a dispersed base and these missiles were brought by some kind of cargo aircraft to this place, then it might be plausible that these are standing in the outskirts of this concrete area. But it is very strange that active missiles should be put in this position at any time, actually.
You can see the missiles on the, I guess, on some sort of cart inside the yellow square, if you didn't spot it, by the way. Yep. Okay, I guess we should go to the next slide. These are two separate Tu-22 M3s, Daniele. What did you spot here?
No, I mean, this is essentially a follow-up. This is on the right is the same of before. This other one looks like an evolution of the different stages of preparation. You can see ladder now are away. There is like a tarp covering the aircraft. Of course, in the background, you can see the black smoke because the airport now is under attack. And there is no personnel again. But you can spot on the left a pile of tires. So it's very likely that this was an aircraft that has been at least serviced and ready to go. Maybe not in a mission, as Morten said. This is maybe a staging point where they can have, because this is quite far away from the front line, and so considered safe, and therefore they do all the maintenance, all the more laborious activity here, and then when it's needed, they just go back, take the ammunition needed, and then execute a series of missions. And you can see that the pile of tires is just there, but it's not on the aircraft. And so it is possible that they would put the tires on after, maybe, but because of the tarp and because on how the airplane looks like, we think that this is another example of an aircraft that was there or in the process of being serviced or just after have been serviced. And all these aircraft, by the way, have been severely damaged, if not destroyed, in some cases, completely destroyed.
By the way, on the picture on the left, you can see a scorch mark on the back left of the aircraft next to the tail. So yep. I'm guessing that this was not fueled, because then we would see fire. Several of these aircraft had no fuel in them, by the way. I don't know what the praxis is, but I assume that that they don't fuel them up all the time, because or else we would have seen a lot more fire.
They don't fuel them until it's necessary, because they don't want to fuel them more than they need, actually. But they will have a certain degree of fuel from the previous mission. So it's not it's not nothing or full. It's a varying degree of fuel in the tanks. So, and over that fuel, it's fuel vapor that will explode as well. So it could be that this hit in the rear was hitting the engine itself and not the fuel tank.
Yeah, I've seen several of the videos. They seem to land either on the top of the central top of the aircraft or close to the engines. So I guess that was some sort of assessment that they had done pre-mission.
Yeah, this Tu-22, I haven't studied it in detail, but with a swing wing design, they might have some fuel in the wing stubs close to the airframe, but the main fuel tanks obviously is in the middle, and they want to have it pretty much in the middle, because then it creates less variation in the center of gravity when you use the fuel.
Yeah, and then we proceed to some other images, which I think it's very interesting. This is of a Tu-95 at Olenia Air Base, which we categorized as heavily damaged. It has not been categorized as destroyed, and neither I've seen any other people who have done battle damage assessment note anything about this specific aircraft in question. But you can see inside the yellow square there is a scorch mark, and when you see the close-up of the subsequent FPV drone that attacked it, so this was attacked twice, there's a large gaping hole in the center of the fuselage. And I just wanted to ask Morten, will this bear ever fly again?
I would say not a chance in hell that it will fly in 25, but Russian engineers are Russian engineers. They built them and they probably could repair them, but they basically have broken its neck. So, but it's very hard from the outside to see what's damaged inside. So, but this is a large maintenance, heavy maintenance thing to be going on. And remember, these aircraft are not at the maintenance facility, and they cannot be flown to that maintenance facility. So it must be a repair on that site, which complicates things, 3 times, 5 times.
Yeah. Okay, I guess we'll leave it there, and then the audience can judge if they think this one is a total loss or not. But we say heavily damaged. And then yet again, there's another incident of this. This was one of those we saw earlier, actually. Tu-22M3s with a lot of tires on top. And there are 2 videos, I think, or maybe even 3, of drones attacking this specific airframe. And you can see that at least one of the drones did damage. The drone that we see the view from also attacked this airplane. So it's not impossible to imagine that this one was even more damaged. And yeah, that's probably close to the fuel tanks, right? So I'm guessing that since these aircraft are more or less permanently stored like this, at least that's our assumption, there's not much fuel in them. At least nothing ignited on this one that we have seen any evidence of. Another Tu-22M3 that had been previously attacked by an FPV drone, and you see a very large hole and scorch marks just behind the cockpit. And I think this one is a case where it must be even more difficult to get this one operational. What do you think, Morten?
This is probably in an area where the most electronic devices are very close. Really a sea of wires and everything. I cannot see this one being repaired ever, because you should also find somebody to fly it after that damage. I would say that would be a hard one.
Yeah, and I just want to note that this is one of the aircraft that have less tires on top of them, and also from the color, when you study the video, it seems in a lot better state than those we see with a lot of tires and other contraptions on them. And there is also active equipment stored around this aircraft, so we can assume that this was an active airframe. And then, Daniele, this is some of the most interesting parts that it has been talked about a little bit around online on X and other places, but this has gotten a lot less focus. What is this, and what's interesting about this?
Okay, so I think this is one of the best design that you probably will see about a kamikaze drone, an FPV drone, because they used a flexible linear charge, which is similar in terms of concept, is exactly the same of a shape charge that you use to pierce through armor. But the main difference is that because of the shape of the metal container, which normally is made by copper, which is essentially a more ductile and more not that hard material, is shaped essentially like as you can see, a V, and is filled with explosives. Now, when the explosion is triggered, what happens is that you have the same effect of a shape charge, but the main difference is that instead of creating a needle of a hypersonic molten jet of metal, you create essentially a kind of a blade. Essentially, you create a line of high-speed molten steel that essentially is mostly used as demolition charge to cut through a door, through barbed wire, the fences, or a very hard object. Now, why using this? Well, you have seen the video. By landing on with a drone like that on an aircraft is much easier than trying with a smaller and more pointy shaped charge, hitting precisely the area that you want. Instead, you can just land, which we have seen some of these videos where the drone just land and then the signal goes out, because they don't need any speed. They don't need to activate a detonator or a fuse. It's just remotely controlled by an electrical discharge that ignites the charge. They have, at least from what we have seen from these released image, they have two of these, and these are very good in cutting metal. So you can see in one of the Tu-95, you can see clearly the operator of one of the drone arriving exactly in the point which connect your wing to the main fuselage of the airplane. And when the explosion occurs, you can see just the wing detaching and flexing, because essentially the explosion is not that big, but the movement of this high-speed material, which is molten steel, cut through the steel and essentially literally cut away the structure, creating a damage that is very much deep inside the structure. If they were using like a more traditional explosive, the explosive needed to create the same amount of damage would be probably much higher, and so the drone would be louder, larger, and maybe the damage would be only superficial. Instead, using such type of charge, you allow to the damage to go in depth. So it's not only a superficial damage. For example, on the Tu-95 that you show with that very big hole, we know that for sure this plume has been penetrating within the cabin and damaging whatever was inside. And as a reminder, the Tu-95 has a large cabin because you have the two pilot, but you have at least another 2 or 3 seats for radio, another couple of engineers. So it's a big room. So this was a very well organized plan and mission, because they didn't just went for a simple explosive, but they selected something that can have the maximum effect with a minimal effort. And in all honesty, they even allow these to have more rigidity on the entire frame of the drone. Another peculiarity, you can see that the drone have 4 probably rubber cylinder, probably used to stack them one on the other, or probably to land more gently on the aircraft in order to be sure that it didn't bounce. So that's a very good level of engineering and also mission planning, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I also just want to note that even if the linear charge doesn't cut straight on the aircraft, the explosion in the vicinity will, of course, create fracture and shrapnel, etc. And I guess, Morten, you can comment what kind of inspection and repairs will an airframe go through that has been close to an explosion where shrapnel is involved?
I mean, this is heavy maintenance, and it's weeks and weeks and weeks until you're certain that everything is covered. And it's not only about shrapnels or small holes in the airframe. But it's also leakages and hydraulics, and it's wires, it's everything. So, and not to forget, if you hit the main wing bar with something like this is a write-off. It's not in production. A Tu-95 with a wing broken like this, I cannot see that they repair that.
In contradiction to, was it the spokesperson of the Foreign Ministry of Russia who said something like all the aircraft will be repaired?
Yes. and the beautiful thing was the SAR images showing us essentially the Tu-95 and not anymore there, and everything burned to the ground.
In normal day life, civilian and military, we use ultrasonic sensors to look for the tiniest cracks, which is enough to ground the aircraft for months. But we haven't started on something like this. It's not supposed to take such a hit, and although the aircraft is sturdy, it's also 60-70 years old.
Yeah,
that's a valid point. And one thing that I really I appreciate of your analysis, Morten, is the fact that you mention transport aircraft, because Erlend, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was in at least Olenia a transport aircraft that many people confused by an A-50, which was close to the Tu-95 that was hit and destroyed.
Yeah, there was an AN-12. I think that's more of a casual hit because of the placement of the drone came into the vicinity of the aircraft and it took it out. But I don't think that was a part of the mission plan. More of a casual occurrence. But yeah, an AN-12 transport aircraft was also destroyed. So yeah, this is the map that we created over the scope of the operation. Of course, we know that unfortunately the operation in Ukrainka failed due to some sort of failure with the truck, unknown reason. But at least at Olenia, Ivanovo, Diaghilevo, and Belaya, the operations were carried out to various degree of success. We can go through that in a moment when we look at the satellite images. Yeah, this is also a very interesting part, Daniele, which also follows through to how complicated the battle damage assessment has been. One of the reasons why it has taken longer for most of the groups that have done it.
Yeah, essentially, without the very powerful means. Essentially, we use visible and SAR images, but these are not high resolution. With a visible, you may be able to see area where there are burn and building destroyed, but aircraft still start to become challenging. But you can still appreciate the change, especially if you do you try to see different dates and then do comparison. But unfortunately, most of the airfield were covered in clouds, bad weather. So many of us tried to use SAR to see any change, despite the Sentinel-1 satellite doesn't have a high resolution to allow images to be clear as some that we have seen from Maxar. And to my big surprise, every airport was more or less any airbase was more or less jammed. So what I mean in jammed means that if you try to open the image from SAR, which is a synthetic radar aperture, which is a particular type of microwave satellite, a satellite that uses microwave to generate images. The areas, especially on Olenia, were completely impossible to see. So you would see just noise. And the reason is because in the day after, just the day after of the attack, on the 2nd, the Russians turned on something that essentially was creating like a jamming effect that essentially did not allow anyone to see through, because essentially there was no way, there was only noise. So by using a tool that was developed by Bellingcat, I was able to analyze the spectrum over many weeks, I think a couple of months, and these allow anyone to see differences in the spectrum, in this particular case in the S-band, which of course is not only radars. There are different things that can affect this type of images, but as you can see in the image, you can literally see two bands, one blue and one red. The difference in color is when the satellite is descending and ascending. So depending on the type of pass, because the satellite passed many times in front of the same point, you can essentially by average know where the disturbance come from. And normally in order to identify them, you need to look for the center of the cross. This led us on a very well-known site, which is the site of the missile defense unit of the airbase. And by zooming there, you can see that there is a radar, or anyway, something that resembles a cupola. And the highest peak of the interference comes from that area. There is nothing else apart forest and other stuff. So we believe that the radar that has been activated in order to cover the SAR and band S wavelength comes from there. This is just nothing groundbreaking, but it's interesting because you can trace these everywhere and along the front line. And this was interesting because it was the first time that the Russian were enabling us so quickly this type of countermeasure. So we were able to spot and localize roughly the area where this was occurring.
Okay, so and the reason for why they did this is of course to hide what was going on, and also potentially hide anything for independent researchers and foreign intelligence agency who wanted to do a battle damage assessment. So, okay, we're gonna go through some of the satellite images with before and after. This is from Olenia, where you see two Tu-95s that then subsequently we can see destroyed, and also with another Tu-95. And then want to go to, there's another Tu-95 that was parked in the corner of the airbase. You can also see that was completely burned down, and also they were cleaning up that burned airframe. I know that there is at least in one independent researcher pointed out that the Russians moved another aircraft over where a burnt aircraft was cleaned away from, and basically trying to hide the fact that they lost an airframe there. Same at Belaya. Here's before and after. We can see several airframes burnt out, and in this case, it's Tu-22M3s. We cannot assess damage of the other aircraft, even though we know that several of the other aircraft were attacked. So we lack material to do any further analysis. Same airport, Belaya, 4 Tu-95s parked, and here we can see 3 of them clearly destroyed. Belaya before the attack, another area of the airport, more Tu-22M3s parked, and one of them at least was destroyed at that particular area of the airport. And then we are coming to the A50 thing, and it's been a lot of talk about this. Ukraine made a big number about the fact that they attacked these aircraft, and this aircraft, quickly, Morten, before we should move to the next part of the stream. What kind of aircraft was this, and what are they used for?
Well, AWACS is a fabulous thing for any fighters. Actually, you can go in silent without turning on your radar, so you go passive. You only have your radar warning, and the radar warning has some kind of resemblance of a radar scope. You can see from which quadrant and which direction, and it's also depicting what kind of threat, what kind of radar that is seeing you, and it also tells you somewhat at what range. This is when you have enemy radars pointing at you. But if you have AWACS on your side, and this is regarding the use of AWACS from NATO bases, F-16s can actually go in silent. And regarding the Su-35 that was probably shot down by an F-16, if they wanted to, they could probably get the link 16 information about that target to the F-16. And if they fire the AMRAAM, the AIM-120, they could fire that without turning on the radar. Now, every fighter pilot, he wants to use his own radar, although he is giving away his position to other opponents' radar warning equipment, but you don't actually trust information going silent. It's like looking in the dark. So I don't know what went on there, but there has been a lot of talk about the F-16 radar's limited range. I would say it's not so limited, but also if you have link 16 information from either the Saabs or the AWACS, they would probably have a very good view of any kind of opponents from, let's say, at least 100 miles in front of you. If you have to rely on your own radar, we are talking about 50 to 60 miles. So the big point here is that you could actually launch the AMRAAM going silent. Regarding the AIM-9, you have to have a good tone, as we say. You hear when the missile is seeing the infrared signal, and you can slew the mirror in the missile to the radar position if you have a lock-on. But if you lock onto a radar or an opponent, then he will immediately be warned on his radar warning equipment that he should probably break away. So there are two schools here. One that doesn't want to lock on, at least very seldom, not to give away your position too much. And then do everything by not locking on means that you have a harder time to maneuver into position for the Sidewinder, to launch the Sidewinder. So today's warfare, I guess, for the F-16s is going for the AIM 120 AMRAAM. But I don't know how many AMRAAMs they actually have gotten to arm their F-16s. That's probably a very good question. Probably you know more than me.
So the episode in question is, of course, the Su-35 that was shot down somehow. We don't know exactly. There's no confirmation or any proof that we can verify that this was shot down by an F-16. But there's at least been some rumors about it being an F-16, and the possibility is there. And as Morten described, if it's true that Ukraine has enabled Link 16 now, then the range of these F-16s would be extended considerably. Did I sum that up correctly?
Yes, and on the other side, if this Su-35 did not have a good radar picture from their kind of links, either from an A-50 or from some ground radars, then the F-16 could go in actually blind very close to him. So it's a big benefit of having that airborne radar coverage.
Yeah, and the reason why I wanted to talk about the AVAX is because, of course, there's been a lot of questions about the A-50s, but Daniele, we have assessed that all of those A-50s that were at that location, especially the two ones that were hit, were not active. So do you have any insights or more things to add to that?
Well, we have seen together that one of those didn't have engine, so it's quite clear that that was not operational. And by using, we didn't post Sentinel-2, but I did some analysis on Sentinel-2 image. The airplane has a very big dish, so can reflect light quite well. So you can see you can count them. These 7 A-50, in particular the two that have been hit, they nearly never moved, especially the last one, nearly moved from their position. So it's likely that these were non-operation. But I want to say it doesn't change much because they hit the radar. So if something happened and they need the spare parts, they will need to build new radar. And with the sanction and with the difficulties that Russia has because have to produce everything by themselves, is putting more pressure. And many of these systems are now essentially surpassed, so they may need a refit, so they may need the new parts, more lead time, and so on. So in general, most of the attacks on those aircraft that we think were not operational still a very big blow because you essentially rendered something unusable. Of course, they can still extract spare part, but it's more pressure and more difficulties to an already struggling logistic. And the Air Force never shine a very bright light on this. You remember a lot of accidents happening also on fighter jets at the middle of the war because of the lack of parts.
Yep, and then we come basically to our conclusion. This is the tally at the end of the day of what we can assess with the material we have. So both being the video material released by the SBU and satellite imagery. And the totals are in the last table. and we count a total of 12 aircraft destroyed, 3 heavily damaged, and 10 unknown but attacked. And who knows what the damage was on those that were attacked, and also if there were more airplanes attacked. That this is the unknown factor here. Total of 25 individual aircraft attacked in that. And then this was a part of the very extensive article that you will find now on our website. So yeah, please go and check that out. I want to go to one last video before we kind of stop this part of the stream. And it's a video, I think it was released either yesterday or the day before, which shows the entire flight path of one of these FPV drones. And I think that's just something we can, let's say, admire the ingenuity of this operation. But there are also some things that we can note from this video. So I'm just going to start it again. You can see it launches from these tiny houses, or what you would call it. And it flies towards the airbase. It's very close to the airbase. And one thing we can note here is that there are fires on the ground approaching the airbase and the airfield, which indicates that some of these drones, for some reason or another, fell to the ground earlier and hit and exploded. They could have been shot down, or maybe they lost a radio link connection to the operator. We don't know, but at least there's evidently fires on the ground. And another thing which we don't just saw now is that the drone seems to be flying on a predetermined flight path, and then there is the second stage of the flight, which here you can see clearly is a human intervention. It's something that those of us that have watched a lot of FPV drone footage can recognize. You see the pilot doing corrections, and it's a completely different behavior from when you see let's call it a automatic flight path, or some call it AI drone flight. I don't like that word because it's the scope of AI is for me unknown when it comes to operation of an FPV drone. What is AI and what is just automated flight? But here you can see the pilot doing some sort of corrections, and I think we can also see that there is some degree of latency involved here, where they are overcorrecting, approaching the aircraft, and going in for the final blow. And then I wanted to ask Morten, and also, of course, say extend my very big thank you for joining us. But do you have any final comments to this operation, and your thoughts about what it means for the Russian Strategic Air Force, and also for other air forces around the world? Because this has been a complete eye-opener for many people, I think.
Yeah, I think this will change tactics, because the good procedure that you have had for a number of years will be to disperse your aircraft if the aircraft is at risk to be attacked at your home base. But by dispersing them to another place, you are actually making them more vulnerable, because they have less protection at those new airports usually. And the bigger the aircraft, the harder they are to protect. So I think this is a game changer if you have capabilities like this that could attack them wherever they are, and having the proper insights. And combined with AI, regardless if you have manual takeover for some of them. But the better the AI for the last mile becomes, the more vulnerable they will be. So yes, I think strategies regarding dispersal of aircraft will be rethought.
What should they do? Build big hangars or?
Yeah, mountain hangars, I guess. I've spent 6 years of my life in a nuclear-proof hangar. Could host at least 30 fighters in it, with big steel doors and floors that were on giant springs, and own water supply, own generators, and so on and so on. I think we probably are more back to to protecting them at home base. But that's only my opinion.
Yeah, very interesting note, and I think there are a lot of Air Force pilots and strategic officers around in the world scratching their heads about what they should do now. So, yeah, thank you so much, Morten. It's been really an honor to have you here with us on the stream. You're welcome to stay, of course, but we're going to continue for a little bit more. But again, thank you.
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Okay, then I will pass the word to Joseph.
Thank you, Erlend. So up next, we have Mr. Stanimir, who often is giving us updates on the Russian economy. It's been a little while, so he thought he would come on and share with us some goings-on. So, Mr. Stanimir, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for having me. So the big news that we're going to start with is that the Russian central bank lowered the key interest rate to 20%. I view it more as a capitulation of the central bank to the pressure from the rest of the government. This time it wasn't just from oligarchs and industrial groups. It was also from the Prime Minister and the Minister of Economic Development. In a way, the Russian market first reacted by cheering and there being a jump in the Moscow Stock Exchange main index, but that quickly corrected during the day, and I think it's more gloom that the semi-independence of the Russian central bank is somewhat gone. What they said was that there was, how do they put it, disinflationary evidence over the past few weeks. I don't see it. So over the past few weeks, the inflation has gone down to 0.5% to 0.05% to 0.07% per week. But however, if you compare the inflation for the first 5 months of 2025, it's 3.38%. And the inflation for the first 5 months of 2024 was 3.21%. So almost a fifth of a percentage lower in 2024. So inflation isn't going anywhere. And the structure in the inflation, yes, in this case, Nabulina was right, that they have an impact on inflation, but the impact they've had is mostly on non-food goods. So big items like washing machines, electronics, cars, those kind of purchases. Whereas for food items, the inflation has been 12.7%, and for services, 12.8%. Now, this is much higher than the official inflation number, and it's brought down only because non-food goods have an inflation of 5.4%. And another way to measure inflation is the analytics center that they have. It's called SMAC, and it deals with short-term macroeconomic forecasting. The leading person in that center right now is the brother of the Russian defense minister. Both of them started the center, and they have an index they call that is the inflation for poor people. That's just critical services and critical foods, the cheapest things people afford. And for the last time they reported it, it grew 20%, so double what the official inflation according to Rosstat is. Now, as for the rest of the Russian industry and the rest of the Russian economy, we've seen that Russian civilian industry is actually in a recession. That's no longer debatable, it's visible. We've seen even that the automotive industry in terms of production output fell down 14%. The only thing that's keeping GDP growth above zero right now is the military industry. But even that, it used to have an average of over 30% growth in 2024. Now it's down to 12, 15, 18% on average for 2025. And ammunition production is down to just several percent. I think the last time we had data for that section of the industrial production that covers also ammunition, it was growing at 5.8%. So we might see the exhaustion of the Russian production scaling somewhere around the second half of this year. Now, the other thing that came in this week was the PMIs. So services were steady at 52.2 for the previous month coming at 50.1. Now, when it comes to PMI, 50 means it's steady. Any value above 50 means an expansion, and any value below 50 means a contraction. Industry had a contraction for 2 months, and now it's barely growing again with 50.2. For April, we got the official GDP number after the 1.5% in Q1. What they came up with is 1% for April when you do seasonally adjusted numbers. What we saw also was the first indication that the Russian oil and gas sector is struggling. So Surgutneftgaz, which is one of the 5 largest Russian oil and gas companies, came in with 439 billion ruble loss, and that's just for Q1 2025 alone. If we compare it to Q1 2024, they had $250,000 in pure profit. So we're seeing some damage to the Russian oil and gas sector already. And EU sanctions for the 189 tankers that were included in the sanctions last time they posted them, that led to a decrease by 28.6% in Russian oil shipments for last week. So it was a dramatic drop in Russian shipments, and the bulk of that drop was from tankers going through the Baltic. We also know that right now, not just Denmark, but also Sweden is going to start inspecting tankers moving through their territorial waters, which is something you can't avoid if you're shipping through the Russian Baltic ports. And that's one of the biggest routes for Russian oil. So that should probably stay depressed for a bit through that route. Also, for May 2025, Russian oil and gas revenues were down 45%. So only 513 billion rubles were collected. For the first 5 months of the year, the decrease is just 14%, but it's going to intensify because the prices for oil are going to stay at the same low levels. When it comes to raw oil for May, because they calculate the price based on April prices, it was $52 on average. Also, the stronger ruble is not helping anyone in the Russian government, because that means even if the oil price goes up, they earn less rubles and they're going to pay most of their expenses in rubles. So at this point, they're expecting to probably adjust the budget a second time this year with further increase in the deficit. And what they're saying is that this time what they were issuing as a budget was the optimistic projection. And even in that, the deficit grew wildly. The other thing that we saw this week was that the liquid portion of the National Welfare Fund, which is their emergency spending money, dropped by 453 billion rubles to just 2.84 trillion rubles, which is now less than the projected deficit for this year. So if they have to cover it, they have to find another way. 300 billion of those, however, were already earmarked spending. They were transferred to banks as a way to subsidize the construction of the high-speed rail that's going to be built between Moscow and St. Petersburg. And this is one of the only big infrastructure projects that didn't get cut this year in an aim to save money. The other big news that we had was that new car sales continue to be low. For the first 5 months of the year, they're down 26%. For May, new car sales were down 28% and a bit. What, however, is more important that is for the first 5 months, Russian truck sales and Russian bus sales are down 52 and 53%, which means that the Russian logistics market isn't improving. It's actually getting worse actively. I'm sure that the new imposed checks that they're doing for all trucks just to check that there are not drones in them are not going to do anyone any favors. And the bus sales are down because municipal budgets can no longer afford as much to improve their municipal fleets, and Russian public transport companies that are private, which are used as carriers for specific routes, are struggling to replace their fleet and are actually going out of business at an alarming rate. It's not uncommon to see daily news stories about issues with towns over 500,000 people finding their new carrier for specific routes and public services decreasing. What they introduced as a way to entice people to join is a new military mortgage. It's probably going to go into effect either at the end of this month or somewhere after that, but it's going to happen this summer. It's going to be like the Arctic preferential mortgage. What Russia has is preferential mortgages where the state pays most of the interest and you get just a fraction of the interest the bank offers. The rest of the money for the bank's interest comes from the state. This will come in at 2%. So instead of paying 22, 23, 24% of interest on your mortgage, you're going to pay just 2%. It's going to also increase the burden on the Russian budget, and it's going to replace the existing military mortgage, which was just a discount of 2%. So if you had a mortgage at 24% that the bank offered and you show them that you are a service member, you are going to get the mortgage at 22%. Now it's going to be a flat 2%. But again, it's going to be an extra strain on the budget, and it's going to be available for not just participants in the war, but also their families. The other thing is that is going to happen over the next few months, but has been recently announced, is that taxi prices are probably going to go up. The reason for that is that the new law for the requirement of domestic cars being used as taxi cars is going into effect. So as part of that, taxi companies will have to replenish their fleets. If they have to change a car, it has to be now bought from the new domestically built cars, and they have a point system, but they're still not sure if they're going to use the same point system and how the different cars are going to be judged. So we don't have just Lada, we also have the Chinese built Haval, which is actually made in 2 plants in Russia. So that can also count as domestically produced cars, but without further guidance from the ministries, people are waiting to see what they can buy and what they can use as taxis. And I think those are all the big stories for this week.
Thank you, Stanimir. You mentioned that most of the big projects are canceled. I think I mentioned that in a news report a few weeks ago, that they've more or less cut most things in half or just eliminated them. Are there any big projects that they've decided are like non-negotiable, that they're still completely behind in terms of government spending, or have they kind of done it across the board without like bias towards one thing or the other?
So one of the projects we talked about, the high-speed rail, that's still on the menu. They're not changing that. However, what they're cutting is most of the infrastructure projects. So you might see, and most of the maintenance of infrastructure. So you might see more bridges collapsing in Russia, even though they're in the news today. I don't see any more investment in them, and because of that, also the automotive industry is suffering. The other thing that they're keeping is the airplane production. So that's a key project. They want to build big airliners. So the small transport aircraft that was supposed to replace the M2, that's probably dead, although they keep talking about reviving it and providing more funds from the government. It doesn't have an engine right now and doesn't have a propeller, so both of those were Western made. But what they're keeping is the big ticket items. So airliners like the MS-21, SSJ-100, even though those are pushing back their first delivery timelines to 2028 now. And the Tupolev Tu-14, that's also on the menu.
Cool, thanks. So yeah, I think at this point, unless you have anything else you want to add, Stanimir, we can go to questions.
Yeah, I think this is it for this week. I think the most eventful thing was the bullying of the Russian central bank. I think that's something that, in a way, it helped them, but we have to understand that in the grand scheme of things, when Russian companies are talking about their need for investment, they're talking about the interest rate being closer to 10%, 8%. And for them, yes, from 21 to 20 is an improvement. And some companies might stick the landing because they have a varying rate, and that might help them just make it through the finish line. But for most, it's not going to improve investment in Russia. And what we're seeing is more and more investments when it comes to industry, is investment in constructing new facilities, but a lack of investment in importing as much new equipment. That is, again, one of the findings of the Russian Macroeconomic Forecasting Center, that everyone is gung-ho to go and build new facilities, but they can't staff them, and then they can't provide enough equipment for them. So that becomes a useless capacity.
Yeah, so thank you, Stanimir, for the update. We always look forward to it. Appreciate you coming on and sharing it with the audience. Chat, if you guys have any questions about the Russian economy or about Operation Spiderweb or about F-16s, it's probably a good time to throw them up in the old chat. So we're going to go over this stuff. Looks like the first question is for me. It says, regarding the French-Ukraine drone cooperation, wasn't Renault already named publicly? I think yes, but then there was like an unnamed car company, or is Renault a car company? I don't know.
Maybe Colby has any insight to this. I was unaware that that Renault was going to be involved, but I know that Renault has not just a car industry. So
yeah, my understanding was like there was a French like security company and a French car company, and the security company was named. It might have been Renault, and the car company was unnamed. And Le Cornu, the French defense minister, basically said, "I'm going to let them announce if they're doing it if they want to." But if there was an update on that, then yeah, thanks for the update. Cool. Next question. Do you see the next question, Erlend?
Yeah, so we went through one of them about the F-16 or potential F-16 kill, but I want to move to this one, and also we can talk a little bit more about the effects about the potential use of the mini AVAX or the Saab surveillance aircraft. Colby, do you have any information about if Ukraine has already started to use these, and also about the Link 16 news?
I've seen no indication that the aircraft have been delivered yet, which doesn't mean that they haven't been, but I haven't seen anything publicly to suggest that they have. And as for the Link 16, it's also important to understand that there's no indication that the U.S. Department of Defense has changed their position on the question of actually providing Ukraine with access to Link 16, because there's no indication that has changed. We've got this announcement that there's going to be some sort of enabling work, is how I would characterize it, but that's different from actually being provided access with Link 16 itself.
But Morten, maybe you can talk a little bit about what the implication of these Saab aircraft will have, and how dependent it is on the Link 16 or similar communication systems.
Well, it's not really important if you have good ground radars, but I have no insight if those ground radars that actually exist down there can relay what they see directly into the aircraft, into the fire control computer. So the big thing here, for even if it's AVAX or if it's from ground radars, is that you can give away target information, which is acquired from some kind of device, being radar or any other systems information. When you see that, this is not classified, but in command control system of NATO and also US, I guess, you can actually see the target as a function of which of the sensors providing the best target information. So it could be a mix of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 sensors that are actually seeing the target. That way you get a really precise target information. And that can F-16 use to fire their AMRAAMs on if they have the Link 16. And I'm not aware that Link 11 is enough. Maybe Køpke can shed some light on that, but I think that it's necessary to have the proper Link 16. And maybe the US don't want to provide that because they're afraid that downed aircraft can reveal information to Russia that they don't want to be sharing.
Did you have anything to add to that, Køpke?
I can't speak to the internal deliberations inside the Pentagon about all the reasons why they don't want to provide Link 16 to Ukraine, but this is not a new thing. This is since the beginning of the war. They have just not been in support of providing that technology to Ukraine. So my understanding is still that they are looking at alternative data link solutions so that Ukraine's fighter aircraft can communicate with these AWACS that they're getting from Sweden. What solution that will be, I don't know. Ukraine is already using different indigenous or non-standard data links with some of the other donated equipment that they have received, like NASAMS, for example. NASAMS is those fire units aren't using Link 16 to communicate amongst themselves. There is some other sort of data link solution that is being employed, so those can all network together. So there's a lot of improvised solutions that have been developed because Link 16 has not been on the table.
Okay, and I see another question that I think Morten can answer from One Grail. When I heard F-16 was being sent, I was worried about low numbers because I view it as a pack hunter. Is this a misconception?
Well, standard operations procedures using F-16s is basically 2 or 4 fighters flying together. The lesser number, if you're flying 2 and 2, this is the most flexible group. But normally you use 4 aircraft, and you're flying as pairs. So I wouldn't say that it's more of a pack hunter than any other fighter. And as I said before, I don't think that radar, in particular after the midlife update in the 90s, you have a number of F-16s that have a better radar now. No, I would regard it as any other fighter, but the extension of information over the link would be making the fighters even more capable. And I might add, I've been to Ukraine a number of times the last year, speaking to a number of people down there. And it's not a question of number of fighters, it's a question of fighter pilots. So you could also argue that there will be different qualifications on the pilots.
And I guess that means that the pairs or the two pairs being able to fly together will have a limitation of what sort of tasks they are able to do, right?
Yes. Well, a pair or two pairs, or it could be also 8, but normally in an air defense situation, if you're talking about that, it's pairs or four airplanes. If you are flying as an escort for a pack of doing a ground attack, it could be more, and it could be loitering on different positions and so on. So there are a number of tactics that you can use. Probably any fighter is the most flexible weapon that you can use, but also the most advanced, the most demanding. So F-16s or Mirage, it's a question of capability regarding the weapons and the armament, and also the qualifications of the pilots. Today, there is less an issue of being able to doing Top Gun close-in maneuvers.
Can you describe what that means for the audience? What is a Top Gun maneuver?
Top Gun is basically how the brilliant way that they displayed it in the two movies. But I also have the Top Gun course, being a qualified dogfight instructor. But that's meaning that you are maneuvering in a very tight airspace and making a visual contact or radar contact really close. Today, there is much more a question of a long distance missile attacks. And the close-in combat is more a defense maneuvers if you oversaw something.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
I might add one thing that I learned, that the Ukrainians are also using the guns for shooting down drones and cruise missiles. I think that's a question of trying to minimize the cost of weapons shooting down each drone, I would guess, because going for guns is a minimum cost option, but it's actually quite hard. So, yeah.
Yeah, and is it also associated with some danger for the pilot, I guess?
Yes and no. If you go about it in a correct way, there shouldn't be too much danger. But if you attack directly from the rear, which could seem like the easiest way, obviously you will get all the fragments in your nose. So you want to attack from position 30 degrees off and above the aircraft that you are attacking. And then when you fire at the proper distance, you could then straighten out and go above the frags. So it's about qualification.
Yeah, and normally, how long does it take to train a pilot to perform these kind of tasks?
It's same as measuring a rubber stick. It's you will improve by training all the time, and some never learn it. Firing on an airborne target, that is maneuvering. And also would like to add, if you look at the drones, the Salas and the reconnaissance big drones that have gotten cameras in the rear, and they are doing what they call evasive maneuvers. You see, they do it very, very slowly. And that's not to break up the wings, but also in a fighter pilot environment, they will abruptly brake, which make it much harder to keeping your sight on. So in a situation where you're going against another fighter, you probably want to kill him at long distance. And if you cannot do that, kill him with M9 Sidewinders, but you will never seek to go with guns. But Ukrainians are obviously extending the use of fighters who might be part of the training, I would guess, to go for the slower drones, which is more or less stable flying and at least not abruptly breaking away.
Yeah, so I think we have another F-16 question, so we'll take them as they come. From Matthew, if pilots are having to fly low to the ground, how close would the F-16s have to get to hit the Su-35 with an AMRAAM?
I don't know, but and I would guess around 30 nautical.
That would be max range with the additional aid from other radars, or the current radar in the MLUs.
It's if the Su-35 comes head on, it will be longer, and but if he flies away from you, it will be shorter. You have to have more conditions to make it more specific, and then you probably shouldn't talk about it in an open microphone.
Understood.
This is an unanswerable question. It should just be left at that.
Yeah. And it, of course, as many other things, depends on various factors. Okay. Did anyone more spot any other questions that we haven't shown that is more on the subject, or does anyone in the panel have any more questions for Morten?
I saw a couple people reference like the Spiderweb 2.0 stuff. I'm not aware of like a second like shipping container style attack that they did. They definitely hit a bunch of air bases like in a pretty rapid follow-up. But does anyone else have any information about like a Spiderweb 2.0 thing?
I think they refer to an attack on a train convoy that had several tank and probably a dozen, if not more, armored vehicle like BMPs.
Oh yeah,
it looks like something big.
Yeah, but I want to say that as far as we can see, or at least I could see as of this morning, there was a lot of speculation about drones being hidden in grain compartments of the train. I think the only sources for those claims were very obscure Russian Telegram accounts, or who knows if they were even Russian, and it got blown up as fact very quickly. So I would disregard that as being a Spiderweb 2 operation until we have something more solid than that.
Okay,
Also
that makes sense. Go ahead.
Yeah, also because it doesn't make much sense to use a light wave drone on a train. Just blow up the tracks. I mean, it's easy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that unfortunately is a case of copium or hopium or whatever you want to call it, when in light of what Ukraine did last Sunday, you kind of want to wish, or you want to hope that the next operation is as big as the last one. And we need to just see more information about that specific operation. Ukraine announced that they hit a train. and destroyed several vehicles. That's more or less what we know.
Gotcha. Yeah. So the train thing definitely happened, but we don't know what method it was done via.
Yeah, well, we don't even know if it happened because we haven't seen any verified information of it. But
Okay.
Except from Ukraine's announcement. Okay. Yeah. And any other questions from the panel, or did anyone spot any more questions that I didn't note?
I think I can add something about the Tupolev factory.
Great, Stanimir. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Tupolev spare capacity apart from, so basically it's the factory for aircraft in Kazan. The spare capacity they have right now is being used to build airliners, and they don't have enough people. So they might build a single plane this year for that spare capacity. The rest is taken up by the Tupolev 160 production, and those come off, I think, one takes 2 or 3 years to build. So the last time they showed 2 newly built, one was partially already assembled, and the other one still had several months left of trials before it could be handed over to the Ministry of Defense. So don't expect any spare capacity over there to rebuild the planes that were lost. I don't think they can even do major repairs at this point.
And just to add something to what Samir said, in general, Russian defense industry expanded, but always in or very basic stuff, like artillery or munition. In terms of system, very, very little. Even for tank, the expansion at this point is minimal.
That's very good insights. I see actually a very relevant question as well from Mina, which is some sort of disappointing news that came out, at least for our part and Ukraine's part. And I guess Colby has more information about this as well. And I think Morten can maybe add something. Do you know the name of the US-made component needed for laser system anti-drone? I guess that's the missile system in question that was missing. Yeah, okay. So basically, the DoD made some decision about some components that were initially going to go to Ukraine. Zelensky made some comments about it today as well. And they were apparently being they are apparently being shifted to US troops in the Middle East. Colby, do you have any more information about that?
It's the proximity fuses for the APKWS precision guidance kits, which go on the Hydra 70 millimeter rockets, which both Ukraine and the United States have been using for counter unmanned aerial systems engagements. So that was the reporting from Wall Street Journal. I understand that reporting to be correct based on my conversations with my sources, although they have also casted doubt on the figure which Zelensky stated, which was 20,000. So I would say don't take that at face value. I'm still looking into it further. That might be the total number that were put on contract initially, but then some subset of that have already been delivered. And then a further subset of that are now reportedly being diverted to U.S. Air Force stocks so that they can be deployed in CENTCOM to allow them to better engage UAS threats in that region. So that's the information that we have available right now.
Yeah, and have they been used on Ukrainian aircraft or only on ground-based systems?
I don't recall if we've seen pictures of Ukrainian F-16s with hydropods on them. We may have. I don't recall offhand if I've seen that or not, but certainly Ukraine has been using them with ground-based launchers, which would be the Vampire. There's been a huge number of videos posted of engagements with Vampire targeting Shaheds. So certainly those, possibly F-16s as well. There's no reason why they wouldn't be able to put them on F-16s as well. Certainly the U.S. Air Force is using them on F-16s in the Middle East. That's where they're being sent. So.
Yep. I think that's it. That's what I can see of questions. Are there any more comments from the panel or any closing statements? I know, Morten, you're interested in Ukraine and its and the war in general. You're talking a lot about it with me, and I know you have some political thoughts as well. If you wanted to share some of your thoughts about, for instance, the military aid going towards Ukraine, I would be happy to let you talk freely about it.
Well, of course, I'm on the side where I think Europe is lagging in a way that's not to understand for a mere mortal. I'm part of the Free Ukraine crew that goes down there every month and delivering for millions of kroners, actually dollars as well. So I'm really impressed, and I think this is, at least for all small countries, is a way to organize the defense. The way that the Ukrainians have been setting up the connection between civilian contribution to direct to the brigades, not only including drones, but large power banks, cars, logistics, protection gear, whatever, military mobile hospitals, and so on and so on. So the NGOs plays a much larger role in this war than anyone else that I can remember. So it's very interesting because they say they can get drones centrally, but then they have to wait a year. And I think that will probably be the situation for many armies today. So I think we have as much to learn from the Ukrainians now that how to fight the war in 2025 than we could have in the military schools. They have to readjust.
So you mentioned the role of the NGO. Well, what is the difference between an NGO and a state actor when on the ground when it comes to the time difference? You kind of touched upon that, but it's very interesting.
Well, at least if we get a wish for, let's say, drones, typically DJI Mavic thermal drones. If we could get hold of them, we could deliver them within a week. And normally we do this and participate together with the Ukrainian NGO that matches our contribution. So normally, if you have $1 million, you could shop for 2. And that comes a long way when it comes to drones, even if DJI is overpricing those thermal drones. So it's typical situation that you can deliver things in 1 week or at least 1 month, where you are lining up in the central queue if you want to have it from the central command. Very interesting setup for fighting a military war.
But I wanted to touch upon the fact that the necessity that NGOs have to participate in this, it is a kind of a dilemma and an unfortunate reality. But it doesn't mean that the contributions of NGOs shouldn't be there, but this is something that is even more important due to the lack of funding, right?
I humbly disagree, Erlend, because talking to the Ukrainians, I would say that they're telling stories that they get 1,000 kamikaze drones late from a private or very late from the government. And they just have to send them back, because when they start them up, they are immediately jammed by the Russians. So the speed of change and how fast they have to adapt to the situation needs something else than a central logistics command. So I changed my opinion about logistics in the military when supporting Ukraine.
Yeah, I think we do agree, but you're right. I probably posed my question a little bit strangely, but the lack of my intent is to say that the lack of aid from state actors, especially in Europe, has made the significance of NGOs like the one you and me are a part of, and other NGOs even more important, and more important than they should be in the first place. But I do agree that the versatility of an NGO on the ground in Ukraine is very, very important and has saved a lot of lives, more than we could probably imagine. So well, if you have any more comments, Morten, please go ahead. Unless there's anything else from the panel, I think we should go to closing.
Okay, well, I think it was a very eventful stream. Thanks for giving us about a week. I know all the big news stories about what Ukraine did were all last week, and a lot of people have moved on, but it takes a little while. It takes a hot minute for the boys to look over all the video that was released and to do a proper assessment of what happened. So now that all the data's in, they worked as fast and diligently as they could, stayed up late, and they got it done in a week. Even that's pretty quick, and pretty quick turnaround for the guys. But yeah, they did a great job. So thanks so much to everyone who participated in that. I know not all of them were on the stream, so thanks guys for all your hard work. I'm sure Chad appreciates it too. Thank you, of course, to our live panel. We appreciate everyone always coming in. Thanks, Stanimir, for stopping by. Thank you, of course, to our guest, Morten, for coming and sharing all that great information about the Russian Air Force and F-16s and whatnot. Thanks, of course, to all the regulars, Mr. Erlend, Mr. Køpke, Stanimir, for stopping by and giving us an update on the Russian economy. Gao, even though he was super late, and of course Daniele, who is always late, but we love him anyway. So thanks to our panel. Thanks, of course, to chat. We really appreciate you guys coming, tuning in live every week. We appreciate your support, spreading the word about Tochnyi. Thanks for liking and subscribing and following us on social media, going to the website, all that stuff you guys do. Really means a lot. Again, the YouTube algorithm does not favor us covering a war. They think it's scary and violent and not advertiser friendly. So we really rely on your support to stay in the information space about Ukraine. So thanks again for your unwavering support. So we'll see everyone next week. Every Sunday we broadcast live at 2100 Kyiv time. So please do tune in, and we'll see you then. If you don't have time, of course, you can catch the video on demand and leave your comments. We'll do our best to take those into account and maybe respond to some of those next stream. So see everyone next week, and Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava.
Heroyam Slava.
On behalf of the brave.